Welcome, everyone, to the Leadership in Quarters podcast, the interview series where leaders come to share their perspectives on different leadership topics. I'm Josh Selden, and today's guest is Alan Lazaros. At age 2, his father passed away in a car accident, and at age 26, after getting into a nearly fatal car accident himself, Alan questioned everything that he was doing in life. He questioned who he was and the choices he was making. He was at an all-time low and decided to change his trajectory forever. Although he had a successful career in corporate America, he made the hard decision to start his own business dedicated to helping others get to the next level in their life, love, health, and wealth. He's the CEO of Next Level University Podcast, a global top 100 podcast with over 1,900 episodes listened in over 170 countries. So welcome, Alan. Thanks for joining us.
You are so very welcome. Thank you for having me. For anyone out there listening or watching, I do not take it lightly. Number one, to be here, and number two, just the opportunity to speak into your life. It is very clear to me at this stage in my life. I'm 36 now. That car accident was at 26, 10 years ago, and we'll get into it a little bit. But at this stage, it's very obvious to me that what you pay attention to is very much influencing every decision you make, what you say, think, do, feel, and believe. So the fact that anyone is out there watching or listening, I don't take that lightly, and I will do anything and everything I can to, number one, come off as sincere as possible. I may say things that you don't like to hear, but hopefully you'll see sincerity over everything, and ultimately I will help you to the very best of my abilities become a more productive, effective, successful, and fulfilled individual. So thank you for having me.
Perfect. We're very lucky to have you, and I can't wait for our listeners to be able to help build their leadership brand with what they learned from you. So thanks.
All right, let's rock and roll.
All right. So before we get into the topic of today, we'd love to hear about your podcast. Obviously, it's extremely successful and listened all over the place. Could you tell us a little bit more about Next Level University podcast?
Okay, so Next Level University is the name of the business, also the name of the brand, also the name of the podcast. But it's based on the premise of Next Level You. So I'm an engineer, computer engineer by trade, and that was my bachelor's. And so everything to me is numbers, and I now realize that's actually the rarest modality of thinking. So if I come off as an esoteric weirdo, that is why. And definitely a hyper-rational person. So Next Level University, Next Level You, pun intended. So this is the iPhone 14. This is Alan version 3.6. I'm 36 years old, and Alan version 3.6 is far more capable, far more intelligent, far more skilled than Alan version 2.6. And so Next Level You, pun intended, a place where you learn how to reach your true potential. Not my potential, not Kevin, my business partner's potential, but your potential. And so it's a very unique podcast where, as you mentioned, we're heard in 175 countries. Very grateful for that. I track this every day. Everything's numbers for me. So across our podcasts, we just hit 1.17 million total listens, which is just unreal. It's really cool. I'm very grateful for that. But the reason I say that is because it's 1% improvement in your pocket from anywhere on the planet every single day, completely free. We do an episode every day, and it's not a 5-minute episode. I think our average time is 30 minutes. The difference between NLU and other podcasts, from what I can see, is we're on a growth journey. And it's almost like you're on the train with us. We don't just speak from, hey, this is where I used to be, this is where I am now, and this is what made the difference. I think a lot of podcasts and podcasters, not all, but some of them almost act as if they've already arrived, when in reality, Kevin and I are on the growth journey with you. We're talking about things we're growing through now. And I've come to realize over time that that's actually very rare. Somewhat disappointing a little bit, because I feel like some of the podcasters that speak as if they've already arrived, it's where are you currently inadequate? Where are you struggling? And so I said to you right off the top here, leadership's the hardest thing I've ever done. And I talked to you already about a bunch of things I'm fucking up. So pardon my French if I'm not supposed to swear.
That's all right.
But I think it's really important to focus on where you're currently screwing up and inadequate in order to get better. Right. And I think that's what makes you a little different. Yeah.
That's great to hear, because I feel like being humble is such an important leadership trait that so many people don't have.
I don't know if I come off as humble. I don't think I do, probably not. But I do agree. I think it's actually one of our core values at NLU. So we have 3 core values. It's a growth mindset, a servant's heart, and it's humility. And the humility needs to be inward, because I think externally I come off probably fairly arrogant. At least that's what I've been told, unfortunately. But inwardly, I do feel very humble. What I know is limited, and what I don't know is limitless. And I need to learn and I need to improve. And I don't believe in big rewards for minimal effort or any of that nonsense that's been going around the internet. Hopefully I don't turn anyone off by that. But ultimately, Kevin and I are tryhards who are trying to lead by example in this really challenging growth journey. There's this whole movement now of, I want to start a company to have more free time. And that's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard. When you start a company, there's no free time. There's just anxiety and stress and struggle, especially for the first decades. Yeah, I'm grateful.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. It's like the lottery mindset, right? Play the lottery, hope to win. You're going to get all the money and you didn't have to do anything for it, which is extremely rare when it comes to business and leadership.
Terrible mentality to have for increasing your probability of statistical success. Yes.
Exactly. So you talked a lot about numbers, statistics, all of that. I love it because as leaders, I feel like we're thrown into data all the time. And so I'm really interested to see what you think about data and how we can use it to benefit ourselves in the leadership aspect and how we really do our day-to-day business. The one thing I see a lot is the constant fight between data and numbers and leaders' feelings. How do you think leaders and people should really focus on data and set their feelings aside a little bit when they're in some of the difficult situations they can find themselves in?
Yeah, love it. Love the frame you just set. I do think that's a big challenge because leaders need high IQ and high EQ. And we're all righty or lefty. And two guesses which one I am. And I think that all of us are either good at relationships or good at success. And there's sort of conscientiousness, and there's a personality test called Hexaco. And it tests you on 26 facets of your personality. And one of them is called conscientiousness, which is organization, prudence, diligence, and work ethic. And organization, prudence, diligence, and perfectionism, which is being thorough. And not perfectionism in a negative way, but in a positive way. And so anyone who has really high conscientiousness is usually that type A super achiever type. And what you find is that person ends up being a leader, but doesn't really understand, myself included, how other people are wired. So for me, I never used to be courageous enough to share any of this, but I haven't taken a full day off in 10 years.
Wow.
I don't intend on ever taking a full day off. I love achievement. I always have. I think I used to hide it socially because I was a coward. But if you were to look up type A on ChatGPT, I know that I know that I know. That's just who I am. And I was on a podcast once with a woman named Deborah, and I said, I haven't taken a full day off in 10 years since that car accident. She said, oh my God, Alan, that's so bad for you. And I said, no, Deborah, that's bad for you. Now, some days it's 14-hour days, some days it's 16-hour days, some days it's 1 hour a day. But to me, I try really hard every day to build toward a bigger, better, brighter future, not just for my family, but for my team and for my company and for the world. And I decided when I got in that car accident at 26 that I was going to build something magnificent, and myself, others, and the world. So it's build the self, build the business, build the family. I think the better order would be build the self, build the family, build the business. But you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so to answer your original question about this leadership thing, and I'm a data-driven, engineering, math modality, science and math and rationality, hyper-rational human being. And a leader needs to lead people and not robots.
Right.
And my business partner calls me a cyborg playfully because I am hyper rational. And it's interesting because I actually don't think I'm that rational. I actually think I'm wildly irrational. I also think I'm an idiot. But I don't realize that compared to other people, I guess I'm very rational and very intelligent. Compared to what I want to be, it's not close. But my point that I'm making is that I've had to learn how other people are wired and learn how emotions work and learn how to be vulnerable and learn how to understand what I don't understand. So one thing that I will share with everybody here is usually leaders have very high, what's known in psychology as self-efficacy. And they're usually leading people who don't have super high self-efficacy. Self-efficacy, there's two types. One is external, one's internal. So external self-efficacy is your belief in your own ability to achieve something externally. So usually leaders have very high self-efficacy. So for me, I feel like achievement always came fairly easy, statistically speaking.
Right.
I have very high self-belief, also known as self-efficacy. I feel like there's very little that I couldn't achieve if I really wanted to, other than some athletic stuff that's very clearly out of my possibility. But when you're leading people who don't have high self-efficacy, you basically don't know what you don't know, and you act as if everything's easy.
Right.
And it's easy for you. It's not easy for them. And so you unintentionally project your own standards onto others. So you have to understand and have empathy for people that maybe are not as competent or as capable or as confident as you. And that's been really brutal over the years for me, because I don't seem super empathetic when people can't work consistently and stuff like that. So I think that everyone is either type A or type B or somewhere in between. There's a couple others. But ultimately, if you are a super achiever and you're leading a group of people who maybe aren't super achieving, that can be very difficult. And you have to be extremely emotionally intelligent as well as super effective.
That's an interesting premise. I feel like from what I'm hearing, step one is realizing the situation, right? Realizing that you have high self-efficacy and the others that you're leading don't, and coming to terms with the reality of the situation. How do you do step two, where you can lead them effectively and build their self-efficacy as they're working for you? Because it is very difficult if you have this belief and they don't, and you're dragging them along. How do you really build that up in them?
Yeah, that's the question. Because if they don't have high humility, I've actually decided not to even try. Because anyone who doesn't have high inward humility, they will lash out when you try to help them. So to break this down, there's two types of people that I coach. I started as a fitness coach and then a peak performance coach and a mindset coach. And I was a business consultant. I was a life coach for a little while, and now I'm a business coach. I have 27 individuals on my roster right now, about to be 28, hopefully, actually by the end of the day. But ultimately, hundreds have come and gone. And so over the years, thousands and thousands of hours, I actually have a 10,000 hour tracker of coaching, training, and podcasting. I'm coming up on 10,000. But ultimately, this is all I've done for the last 10 years. And you learn over time who you can't help. And I'll explain. Because I used to be naive as shit. And I thought I could help everyone succeed. Super naive. Okay. There's two types of people that I coach. There's really three, but I'm going to break it down into two. And just understand that for anyone out there who's a clinical psychologist or a therapist or that kind of thing, I know I'm generalizing, but I'm doing it to make it practical. So the two types of people that I coach are, the first type is my favorite type. These are the people who actually are better than they think they are. So I would put you in that category so far. Otherwise, you'd be doing this with me unconsciously. Right. So you are probably a better leader than you think you are. And you're curious to learn about leadership from an authentic place and desire to get better. Because if you think you're a great leader and you actually are a sucky leader, you basically close yourself off to learning from someone who might be younger or whatever.
Exactly.
Those are the people that are impossible to coach, because it's like this mug is covered. You can't pour into someone who already thinks they're better than you. Now, here's the problem. It's not conscious. They don't consciously think they're better than you. They unconsciously do. So my COO, her name's Christina. She's the best example of this. She is so easy to coach because she has no idea how awesome she already is. She's always just trying to be more awesome. She doesn't think she's that great, so therefore she can just work. She's competent as hell. If you met her in person, she's not loud. She's a little mousy. She's short. She's smaller, but she's a badass. She's capable of so much. And then you meet these ding-dongs who don't know much of anything. They're not that good at anything, but they think the world of themselves.
Yeah.
And those are the people that I just cannot coach, because usually they end up delusional, and that's just really not good. And so for someone who has inward humility, to answer your question, it's actually very easy to help them just believe in themselves more, because they're already better than they think. So all you have to do is help them identify that.
Yeah.
And then that's a self-worth conversation. So if you want to help someone build self-worth, you help them keep the small promises they make to themselves. You help them really, most of the time, set boundaries with people that are blowhard, pufferfish, arrogant people. And you help them really start building self-efficacy, and more importantly, identifying how good they actually are and climbing that staircase. And very rarely does someone who has high inward humility allow that stuff to go to their head when they start succeeding. Whereas someone who comes to me and coaches with me when they're down and out, who usually thinks the world of themselves, but like maybe had a big humble pie moment, they come, what happens is when they pass a certain point of success, they get really cocky, and they forget that it was actually the work we did together to get them there. And I have a test now that I do with all my clients after a certain couple years, because I have massive pain and failure, where I ask them, where were you 0 to 10 in terms of success and fulfillment when we first met? And where are you now? And usually it's somewhere like, I'm an 8 now and I was a 3. I said, okay, what made the difference? When my coaching, the metrics, priorities, habits, systems, when that doesn't end up on the list, I know they're delusional, because I know that it was the work we did together behind the scenes when no one was watching that brought that success from an engineering perspective. Systems thinking, inputs, outputs, priorities, all that. When they don't even put me on the list, I know we're in trouble.
Right.
They've lost sight of what actually created the success. Because when you take me out of the equation, a lot of it goes. And so to answer your original question, when I ask a Christina, I'm the only one on the list. She's not even on the list. It's like you, your coaching, and the system. No, but you did a part too. And someone like a Christina, sky's the limit, because you can always pour into someone who's that humble. Unfortunately, she'll get taken advantage of by people who don't actually know more than her, but they think they do. And this is a leadership conversation too, because there's the real world and there's the social world. In the social world, someone like a Leonardo DiCaprio looks like a stronger leader. But in the real world, there's no way that dude actually knows more than I do. As arrogant as that sounds. See how arrogant that comes off?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. See? But the truth of the matter is, like, who studied life more? Who studied business more? Who understands, right? And again, nothing against Leo. I'm not a super huge fan anyway with some of his choices, but whatever. It doesn't matter. The point I'm making is there's the social world and the real world. In the real world, what matters is self-belief, self-worth, awareness, intelligence, capabilities, understanding yourself, others, and the world, decision-making paradigms, systems thinking. In the social world, all that matters is results, unfortunately.
Right.
And if your Instagram looks good, people think you know everything, when in reality, you might know very little, and we all can think of someone like that. So again, nothing against Leonardo DiCaprio. The point I'm making is that Christina is amazing in the real world, but in the social world, she doesn't have the perception to maybe be the leader other people look up to.
You said something that I don't think a lot of people realize or have actually internalized before. You said that you've learned over time that there are people you just can't help. And again, it's like when you're fishing and sometimes you just got to let them go, right? The ones that you catch. And I don't think people realize that, especially on the EQ side, there are things you just can't teach somebody. And we've talked humility a lot, which I know is diverging a little bit from what we were going to talk about. But I think it's so important for us to talk here is there are certain things you just can't teach people, and you have to come to terms with that. And we as leaders only have so much energy you can pour into somebody. Or you talk about pouring into somebody, all of that comes from a bigger picture, and that picture will empty at some point. And sometimes you just need to know, humility is a great example. Sometimes you just really can't teach humility to somebody. It's one of those things that come naturally. And if somebody isn't humble and somebody is that big puffer fish that is going to go and make themselves look good when in reality they don't really have a lot at their core values, you're not going to get through to that person. And usually it takes one of those oh shit moments that knocks them down a peg that maybe teaches them humility. But I feel like for those types of people, it's situational humility and not humility somebody can teach them themselves.
100% situational humility. That is so... I didn't know that until my 30s. Just because someone is coming off of a really bad break does not mean they're actually humble. You need to see how hard they work when things are going well. And trust me, I get it, right? I'm not always as humble as I need to be either. But I don't only work hard on the bad days. And you have to catch people. So people say, and this is the biggest leadership lesson I can possibly give right here, other than leading by example. Number one is leading by example. If you're not doing that, just shut up. Okay. Second, and by the way, that's like a lot of leaders. It's alarming to me that you're talking about something that you're not doing. I can't even. So that's number 1, 2, and 3 right there. Lead by example.
Yeah.
When no one's watching. The second thing, and this is what I wish I could go back and tell me before I started leading people. Alan, it's who someone is and what they are when no one's watching. That's who they really are. People say that words lie, actions don't. I disagree. Actions lie too. Actions while they're in front of you lie. You need to catch them reading a book. You need to catch them working hard when no one's watching. Because I realize that, to your point about situational humility, if someone is focused on looking good rather than actually getting better, I've had two people I can think of in my past. We had a 24-person team with 24 departments and a charity 2 years ago. We now have a 16-person team, if you include me, and 13 departments. So we've had to contract a ton. And I'm so glad we did. Oh my God, my life is so much better. But there was someone who looked amazing on paper, who looked super competent, and then someone else who I would have overlooked, like a Christina. It's not close in real life. Not even close. And I now realize through massive pain, suffering, and failure that I needed to look beneath the iceberg way better. And I have a filter now that I use called UNMEDSAI. It's called my UNMEDSAI score. I actually did this with you unconsciously the moment I met you. You were super grateful, even though I was late. That shows me that you're not entitled. And I was apologetic, and I said, listen, I'm sorry. I need a 5-minute buffer. I just got off with a client named Cole. Like, I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you for having me. And you were very gracious and kind to me. If you were entitled, you would have been pissed off at me. Yeah. And to me, that would say something about your character. Okay. So I have this filter that I use. Number one is, so UNMEDSAI is the acronym. Unstable, naive, manipulative. That's the bad one you got to look out for. Entitled, delusional, significance driven. You know those people with a birthday month?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Arrogant and immature. So these are the 8 things that I steer clear from. If you show me that you have a high UNMEDSAI score, I will basically keep a huge distance and set up an energetic boundary and make sure that you don't ever get into my company. And honestly, you would never get on my coaching roster either, because I've just learned through so much hardship and social suffering who is too immature to actually do real growth. Right. And that's true. Not everyone can work at Apple, right? And again, I know how arrogant that comes off. Are you Apple? No. But what I do know is that as a leader, you have to be very careful about who you allow into the castle.
Right.
Because if you don't, the Trojan horse in the castle will destroy the value. And they'll hurt your heart a lot as well. And then blame it on you. It's really bad. And so I'm only 36, so I'm still young, but I learned through a lot of suffering who to make sure I steer clear of.
Again, I feel like you keep dropping these nuggets of wisdom that I love and I latch onto as you're talking. So one thing I want to make sure that the listeners really take to heart, which is something I firmly believe, is your comment about the actions in front of you versus the actions that you don't see. And I'm a firm believer. The whole point of my audio podcast and my YouTube podcast is building leadership to build the right culture, because we read all of these terrible things about toxic cultures and terrible managers and terrible leaders and everything. And so I want to make sure that we can make a difference to make better leaders out there and build better cultures for people to live in. And my definition of culture is what people do when you're not watching, what people do on the night shifts, what people do on the weekends when the leaders aren't there. And it's exactly what you said, because I can think I'm making progress in my culture at my work, at my team, my company, whatever it is. And I will gauge my success based on what I see instead of what I don't see. And I think that is so important for people to realize, is that people will tell you what you want to hear and they will show you what you want to see when they're in front of you. But it's really what they do when you're not there that really shows that culture you're trying to build. Is it really successful, and are people taking it to heart?
Yeah, it's called being hoodwinkable.
Yes.
I was extremely hoodwinkable. And you have to see above the iceberg and below the iceberg. And some people have this huge iceberg above the surface and the little tiny iceberg under the water. And then other people like Christina have this huge iceberg of mountain under the water. And it's this little, it's only coming out of the water a little bit. And I'll take 1,000 Christinas over one of those others any day of the week, or the opposite. But it's very important, because who you are and what you are when no one's watching is who you actually are.
Right.
That's where the real work is done. I mean, we've all seen companies that, like, this isn't a rap concert, right? You can't just put on a show and then dip.
Yeah.
You have to have the humility and the courage and the work ethic and the discipline when no one's watching in order to sustain real success. We've all watched some of these companies that hit it big and then they rebrand, or what, like Bang, for example. Yeah. It's just, let's just pick models and have them drink our stuff on Instagram and it'll go viral. And those companies, it's just, you can't build anything lasting and sustainable unless it's built on fundamentals. And the fundamentals are really unsexy and they're really boring. and they're not good for Instagram reels. And so social media is the social world, and the real world is where real work gets done. That's when the computer is invented. That's when electricity is invented. That's when the phone is being built on the day-to-day. And yeah, I've used to fall for that. And I think in intimate relationships, same deal, right? You have the honeymoon phase where it all looks great on reality TV. It's your first date was in a hot air balloon in Italy. It's not going to work, right? You have the wedding, and then you have the marriage.
Yes.
Which one is more likely true? We've all seen everyone's wedding looks miraculous on Instagram, but how many marriages are actually magnificent when no one's watching? And I think that is the unfortunate rarity, but that's where the real work is done. And as I've gotten older and older, and I've been more mature too, because in my youth I was also immature and definitely more perception than real world at times. But over time you realize if anything's going to be sustainable, I'm going to have to do the real work in the real world. And we all know that couple that looks awesome on Instagram and they're actually wildly out of love and hate each other and probably don't even sleep in the same bedroom, but the photo on Instagram looks great. Versus I've met a couple people, very few, but where the relationship is actually better than they could even make it look. And Emilia and I, we have a podcast together, and we tell our listeners, this is actually the worst. This is harder. Our relationship is better behind the scenes. Right now, we're focused on the listeners, the audio quality, the video, how it's worked, this conversation. In real life, we're way better than on the show. So, and on the show, we're good too, but just not as full selves because you're a podcaster, you get it. So ultimately, I hope that everybody can aspire to be better in real life than on Instagram.
I hope so. And that's what drives me crazy about the social network these days, right? Whether it's Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, obviously it's like professional versus the personal life, but nobody posts their tough moments. And so every time you've got back to the self-worth side, you've got these people who are struggling with self-worth and they're looking and they're seeing all these amazing things people are doing on Instagram or on LinkedIn. I just got this promotion and my life's great. Nobody posts when their life isn't great. And so I feel like from a culture side also, we're destroying people with social media because they're just comparing themselves to these amazing things that isn't true life, right? I go on vacation maybe once a year and I could post pictures like these amazing things about my vacation and everybody's going to go, oh, Josh's life is so great. But yeah, I mean, I had this really great vacation for these 5 days out of the whole year and my life is stressful and crazy and everything the rest of the
365 photos.
Yeah, exactly.
From 5 days. Yeah, exactly. 100%.
And people just put that unnecessary stress on themselves, I feel. And it impacts how they work and how they interact with others because they really put themselves down and you really get that low self-worth that you discussed.
You can't compare your real life to someone else's highlight reel. And to your point, it's very scary to think about, especially in the 21st century, because this is fairly new. 30 years ago, Google didn't even exist. It's only a 28-year-old company, right? So I'm 36 and I know I'm not old, but I have something called, you know how there's doggy years?
Yeah.
There's also tech years. And I gave a training at my alma mater 3 or 4 weeks ago. And it was an entrepreneurship club. And we came in and I was in the car with my girlfriend on the way home because she videoed it. She was there with me. And I said, I was acting like I was 80 years old. And so I'm in my mid-30s and I was acting like, well, back in my day. And I'm like, why was I doing that? That's so weird. And I was like, oh, those are 16 years because they're 20. So they were 18, 19, and 20. And they're in college, and they went to the same college I went to.
Oh, cool.
But those 16 years, in terms of technology,
Yeah.
the world was completely different 16 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. It's insane. 16 years ago, the iPhone was fairly new. 16 years ago, there was no Snapchat. Instagram hadn't been invented yet.
No.
It was barely. Twitter was brand new.
You had MySpace.
Yeah, I mean, we had MySpace. Yeah, so I think that in the 21st century, to talk about what you just mentioned there with culture and comparing your real life to someone else's highlight reel, one of the best parts about coaching is I'm behind the scenes with everybody. I literally coach a supermodel in Dubai.
Wow.
Who just moved to LA, and she's trying to be an A-list actress, and I'll keep it anonymous, of course. But I'm telling you right now, if you look, and her Instagram is, very done up. But behind the scenes, she is insecure and she struggles. And I also was close friends with a Patriots cheerleader, and we interviewed people all over the world, millionaires, 1 billionaire. When you get behind the scenes, you realize, oh, so you guys are like wildly insecure. I just didn't know. One woman I'm thinking of right now, legit supermodel, literally couldn't even air the episode because she's like, hey, can you cancel that recording because I didn't have makeup on? And it's like, you look great. What do you mean? Got it. It's all curated. It's just marketing. And the Big Mac never looks like that in real life, right? That's a fake Big Mac that they recorded. And if you can just really get that, like behind the scenes is always a struggle, not just for you, but for fucking everybody.
Yeah.
You don't have to think something's wrong with you anymore. There's nothing wrong. Struggle is the norm. And so I always say you have to sell what people want and then they stick around for what they need. What people want is me to help them grow their company, their revenue. What they need is self-improvement. Self-improvement sucks. Growing your revenue looks awesome, sounds awesome, feels awesome. What it takes to do it is terrible. Yeah. It's just really freaking hard. And every business owner knows that. So, yeah, I think you can just relinquish yourself from this social world versus real world comparison thing and just realize that everyone's real world is much harder than it looks in the social world.
And even in the real world, I feel it's another thing people don't realize is that you have this person who's this strong leader who comes across as confident and can make the big decisions and make them in time. And they always seem to be the ones that they're cool, calm, and collected no matter what's going on. And those are the introverts, right? And those are the people who are self-conscious and who aren't confident in themselves. And once they leave that area and that environment, they go back to who they truly are. But that's not the person that people see. And again, that's who they compare themselves to. And so I'm going to go and diminish my own self-worth because I'm going to see you as this big confident leader in my workplace. And oh my God, it looks like nothing rattles this guy. And then you go home and you sit down and you replay everything in your head and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that. I must have come across as such an idiot making this call, but it's not what people see. But then in the real world as well, we're comparing ourselves to what we think, the perception that we have of people. And I think we're diluting our own opinion of ourselves in doing that.
100%. I have these 3 circles of the ego. And here's the other piece too. Anytime someone has bravado, it's fake. As a matter of fact, the bigger the bravado, the less likely it's actually real. And I'll give you the actual framework that I did an article on with this. The outer layer, the 3 circles of the ego is what I call this. Yep. The outer layer is who you want others to believe you are. The next layer in is who you want to believe you are. And then the layer inside of that is who you really are. When I got in my car accident at 26, my father passed away when he was 28 in a car. So for me, it collapsed all the circles. And so pre-26, I was from the outside in looking successful and happy and fulfilled, when in reality, from the inside out, I was suffering. And now I look successful and happy and fulfilled, but in my real life, it's actually even better than this could possibly portray. But that's because I flipped the script and I stopped focusing on external success at the expense of internal fulfillment. And I actually went broke doing that, so be careful. I focused all of my effort on self-improvement, personal growth, and personal development over the last decade. Like, I'm talking every book, every course. I sat thousands of dollars. Like, I went broke, and I had a lot of money invested. I liquidated all my assets. I went past broke. It's called the 227 rule. You start a company, takes 2 years to go into debt, 2 years to climb out, 7 years to be successful. When I first heard that, I was like, not us. It's exactly what happened. Okay. So when I went from externally successful and internally unfulfilled, I flipped the script. I was like, I'm going to focus on internal fulfillment and hopefully external success will be a byproduct. And I went broke. So what you have to do is find a way to integrate the two. And it's very hard to do. And this is for the leaders out there. What work is meaningful that fulfills you is often not what the economy pays the most for, which is why so many people love volunteering. And why there's so many studies where volunteering actually brings more fulfillment than your actual work. It's because what is meaningful work for you, your passion and purpose, is often not profitable. Right. I would be a self-improvement coach if I could, but nobody pays a self-improvement coach. So I have to be a business coach, and then, hey, if you want to grow your company, you have to improve yourself. Right. So ultimately, hopefully this will land, is let those circles collapse and have the courage, humility, and vulnerability to own whatever it is that you are, good, bad, ugly. And then if you can grow from that authentic place, eventually you really will. My social world looks worse than my real world. Before my car accident at 26, my social world looked a lot better than my real world. Sure. And this is the thing that I really hope lands, and I've never actually said this on a podcast, at least not in this way. The real world is what ultimately matters, because that's where you live every day. There are people that had what seemed like the best life ever who took their own life. And when I faced mortality, I realized that's a losing game. It doesn't mean I don't want to be successful. It doesn't mean I don't want to be influential. It doesn't mean I don't want to be a leader. It just means that I have to make sure that I'm fulfilled in my real life first. And that's the scaffolding that I can build my impact on. And that's actually sustainable versus the quarter life crisis or midlife crisis or 75-year life crisis of what if my whole life was wrong? And what if I never really got back to my true essence?
Yeah, and people realize that way too late. Yeah. So, Alan, to say that I enjoyed this conversation would be a complete understatement. So, first of all, thank you again. Completely different conversation than I thought I'd have walking in. Way better than I could have imagined. So, I want to thank you. Obviously, my listeners will love it as well. I know that. And for the listeners, I want to make sure I'll put all of Alan's information in the description area on the YouTube page. So, you'll have access to the NLU podcast or the Next Level University podcast and any other information about Alan. So you can obviously learn and listen and get the wisdom that we got here. We just got a small little blip and a piece, little appetizer of everything that you can offer. So really appreciate that. And for the listeners, obviously you can continue listening to the podcast here on the YouTube page. You can email me at leadinquarters@gmail.com for any questions, anything else you might want from Alan. We can get a hold of you there. And my normal podcast, Leadership in Quarters, for all of the audio podcasts that we have as well. But again, just really wanted to thank you, Alan. This has been probably one of my favorite podcasts I've done so far on the interview series. So thank you very much.
Josh, you are so incredibly welcome, and thank you for doing the work that you're doing in the world, because it's very clear that you are incredibly sincere in your desire to help your listeners. And as someone who has met many podcasters over the last 10 years in this self-improvement space, personal growth, personal development, self-improvement, mental health, I went into it very naive, thinking that everyone in this industry is going to be different and they really want to help people. Nope. Not true. There are some snakes in the garden for sure. And so thank you for your sincerity and for having me. And for anyone out there watching or listening, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. The sexy, shiny stuff is not it. And just don't fall for it. Do the work behind the scenes, get a little better each day in the areas that matter, core values, standards, goals, real world. Focus on the real world over the social world. And not overnight, but in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, your future self will be like, all right, this is really starting to work. But in 2 years, it might be pretty terrible.
Yeah, for sure. Perfect. Thanks again, Alan. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate everything that you've brought to the table today. So thank you again.
Thank you, Josh.